All right, we're back. Graveyard Shift Movie Podcast, episode number 134. This week, I watched a movie called I Drink Your Blood because I was looking for a movie to watch and I saw the title, and the first thing that popped into my head was There Will Be Blood. I Drink Your Milkshake. And that was, so immediately I was like, well, I'm watching this. But I Drink Your Blood from 1970. And boy, was it something. It was a Grindhouse movie, which I didn't know. And then when the movie started, the intro had like the Grindhouse, the funky like intro, whatever. And then I was very excited because I love that intro. But I'm gonna give it a 5, purely because it's not good. Don't get me wrong, but man, I enjoyed it. There's a lot of just wacky moments that I enjoyed a lot. This is classic early 70s, like kind of I'm trying to think of the word for it. Because a lot of this movie revolves around like LSD, and it's very clear that this movie was made to be like, hey, if you take LSD, this is what happens to you, you know? But and there's a word for that, but I can't think of it any, but yeah, I had fun with it, so I'm gonna give it a 5. So there's that. It's on Amazon Prime if you want to check it out. So there's that. And spoiler warning for I Drink Your Blood. I'm gonna ruin everything about it. So if you want to see it, go watch it now because you've been warned. The movie starts off with a satanic group who's in the middle of the woods, and they're doing a ceremony. And the dude starts off by going, the leader of the group is like this Native American dude. And he's like, I'm a Capricorn. And I was like, oh God, he's one of these dudes who like goes around and asks everyone what their sign is and all this shit. And then he's like, I'm the first-born son of Satan. And I was like, oh. that took a turn from the Capricorn. But they keep going about this ritual, and in the middle of this ritual, they announce that Satan was an acid head, and so they hand around this cup filled with blood and acid to everyone in the group, so everyone can start tripping together. And there's about 8 people in the group, and we'll get introduced to them all more throughout the rest of the movie. Everyone's naked in the middle of the woods, by the way, and then they pull out this chicken, and as soon as I saw the chicken, I was like, uh-oh. Immediately I was like, it's 1970 and there's a chicken, and they're like, we have to make a sacrifice. And they just straight up murder a chicken in the beginning of this movie, a real chicken. I saw that the director of the movie was like, we didn't hurt any animals, because there's a lot of animal killing going on in this movie. He's like, no real animals were killed, except for that chicken at the beginning. So it is confirmed that chicken was, they slice his neck, and they like dribble the blood on like this naked chick who's laying in like a satanic circle or whatever. And everyone gets a cup, and they're drinking it. And then eventually the leader of the group notices this lady who's been watching them the whole time from the tree line, and he's like, oh, intruder. And so he sends 2 of his guys to run after her and catch her. And as they chase her, we get this ridiculous just chase music that it plays a couple times throughout this movie, and each time it's hilariously out of place in what's going on. So I'll play some of it here. Eventually they catch up to her, and they like drag her down to the ground, and they start like before we can see anything really happen, we cut back to the bonfire where one of the guys in the cult, who will learn his name is Andy, is like, oh hey, that's Sylvia, I invited her here. And the guy's like, oh, I told you not to invite anybody. And then we just cut away and we don't see what happens, but we go to the next morning where Sylvia is just stumbling into town and she's covered in like scratches and blood. Um, and she comes across what I'll learn later is her little brother, who I think the little brother's name is Pete. Or that might be the grandpa because it's the she has a little brother, and then there's this chick who runs a bakery who has no relation to them, but I guess is somehow kind of their caretaker. But they live with their grandpa because the Pete is like, I gotta go get grandpa, and so he leaves to go get their grandpa, who they say is a doctor, but then we learn later is a vet. Because as he's treating the girl, he's like, "Oh, I'm a vet. I can't do anything about this," you know. Which I think is I think even a vet could be like, "Oh, well, knows enough to treat a human enough." But yeah, whatever. Um, so then they get Grandpa to come and check on the girl, and then I love the last time we saw the satanic cult. They had this whole thing about I'm Satan's son and all this crazy stuff. The next time we see him, they're broke down on the side of the road, and the guy's like, "Oh, I guess we're gonna have to walk to town." And so it went from Satan's son to my car is broke down and we're stranded in the middle of nowhere. Um, so he gets everyone out of the car and he's like, "We gotta walk to the next town." But one of the guys is still fast asleep, and Andy goes to wake him up, but the leader dude stops him and is like, "Hold on, don't wake him up." And so they get out of the car, they close the back door, and then they just shove the car off the side of this hill. And they do it as like a prank, gotcha, like this would definitely be on TikTok if it was 2022. Oh god, it's 2023 nowadays, isn't it? Jesus Christ, I'm stuck in the past. um and but inside of the car, like the dude's just laying flat on his back in the back of this car. Like it totally should have probably broken his neck. But they all laugh about it and they go down there and open up the door and he gets out and he's like, "Oh, you guys are jerks." And they're like, wake up, lazy, we're walking to town." And so yeah, but it's just a weird a weird prank that probably should have been a lot worse than it was. Um, we go over to the grandpa who is telling them that the Sylvia is in shock, so she can't tell them what happened. Um, but he's like, it's a waiting game. We got to see whenever she snaps out of it. And so the bakery lady is like, "Well, I got to go tell Roger. He'll figure out what to do." So she drives up to tell Roger about what happened to Sylvia, and I guess she's dating Roger. Um, and Roger is like the head construction guy here, and these guys are building like this dam. And so something about building the dam has caused the city to almost become abandoned. There's only 40 people who live in the town. And this dam has something to do with it. And they talk about once the dam is built, people should come back and stuff. But she goes and tells Roger about what happened to Sylvia because she's convinced that one of his guys did it. She's like, who else would it have been? That this is the first time they throw out rape, which I don't think the girl was raped because later they changed it to just attacked, but I'm not 100% sure. So it definitely seemed like a rape, but I'm not entirely sure that's what happened. But she's like, it was one of your guys. And he's like, "Listen, it wasn't one of my guys. I don't know who it was, but I'll try to figure out. And so she's like, "Okay, please just try." And there's also a random part in here where she starts to talk about, like, I think the dude's name was Fred, who I'm gonna guess was her ex-husband, but the guy just like stops her and he's like, "Oh, we don't talk about the past." And I was like, "What?" And they never go in further on that, but there's just, yeah, so Roger gives off some weird vibes to start off the movie, but whatever. The cult eventually gets to town, and the leader is like, this town's deserted. We're going to make this our base of operations for a while because no one's here to figure out what we're doing. And so the first thing they do when they get there is go to the bakery that's run by the lady who is helping Sylvia and them. And they walk in and instantly they make up like a story about how like, oh, we're in a rock band and we broke down on our way to a town. Can we stay here for a while or whatever? And instantly, wouldn't you be like, well, hey, this lady just got attacked. We have no idea who would have done that from this town. And now here are these random people that just showed up. Good chance it could probably be them. But she doesn't think about that. She's just like, oh, I got some meat pies. And she just sells them some meat pies. And she's like, oh, everything's deserted here. So just go find a house and just take a house. So that's what they literally leave and they go and find this deserted hotel and they're just like, this is ours now. And they just start breaking into it to go and live in there. The little kid, I keep calling him a little kid. He's probably like 12, which I guess that is like a little kid. But he goes and follows them and sees them breaking into the hotel, and he's like, oh, that place has been deserted a long time, you don't want to go in there, it's full of rats and stuff. And they're like, well, I guess we'll have a rat party. And the next thing you know, we get like a 4-minute scene of them just hunting rats. And this is why I was convinced that more animals were killed in this movie, because I was sure that they were actually killing these rats, but like Prime like cut it out so you wouldn't see it. But apparently not. And supposedly the shots later of all the dead rats is like lab rats that were already dead before the movie started. So they used dead rats for the scenes of dead rats. They didn't kill live rats to make them dead rats. But yeah, and they go rat hunting, and they fucking kill all these rats. And then they throw it on like a trash can fire outside to grill them up. But they didn't skin them. Like, there's still hair and stuff. Like, it is gross. I was like, what are you guys doing? Also, I forgot about this. When one of the guys comes out of the hotel with, like, a stick with a bunch of rats stuck on it from where he killed, the little kid doesn't want them to see that he's been, like, spying on them or what they're doing. So he goes running away, and his run to get away is amazing. It's the slowest little run to get out of frame I've ever seen in my life. So they all, that night, go and they're like, okay, we need to test out who among us is too weak to be part of our group and who isn't fully committed. And their way of testing that is through like pain and stuff, right? So the dude who they sent down the hill in the car has been complaining since they got here about like what they're doing and what their plan is and stuff. So he's the victim here, and they tie him down, and they just like cut the bottoms of his feet, and this causes him to pass out. And then they string him up in the attic by a rope and push him around like on a swing, and he keeps splashing his blood from his feet onto like all the women's faces and stuff. It's very weird. In the middle of this happening, Sylvia finally wakes up and comes out of her shock state, and she tells the granddad what happened to her. So granddad immediately grabs a double barrel and is like, well, it's time to go hunting. And he just goes walking over to the hotel and walks in and is like, time to fucking kill some people. He goes walking into the attic. The leader dude sees him and stops pushing the guy around on the swing. And he's like, oh, what do we got here? He's like, you got that shotgun. Are you planning on killing me? And the granddad's like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to do. And then proceeds to let them just smack his hat off of his head, grab his glasses, throw him to the ground, and stomp on them, and then just take the gun out of his hands without putting up a fight or a struggle. And then he gets punched in the stomach, and you would think that Brock Lesnar himself just punched this man in the throat by the way he falls down to his knees. And he is out of commission. He falls down, and they're gonna fucking kill him. They're like, oh, we're gonna kill this guy. But before they can, the little kid followed the granddad to the hotel. So he's outside. He's like, hey, granddad, granddad, what are you doing? You know? So they're like, well, we can't kill him because this kid will know. So they send this one lady out to deal with the kid. And by deal with him, I mean, she tries to like seduce him. And she's like, don't you like girls? Why don't you come play with me? You know? And he's like, bitch, I'm not coming in there. You can't get me. And so this doesn't work. So the leader dude comes down himself and he tries to just grab the kid and pull him in there. And the kid's like, I don't know you. And he kicks him in the dick and he runs away. And once again, the leader dude chases him and we get some more of that great chase music that I mentioned. And the kid eventually gets to like this stair set that's in the middle of nowhere. And he picks up this big stick and he keeps like swinging it back and forth to keep the guy away from him. But as he's doing that, another one of the cult members sneaks up behind him and grabs him and drags him back to the hotel. But when they get to the hotel, they just bring out the granddad who's all messed up and bloodied, and they just are like, you two get out of here, and they just let them go, you know? So, when they get back to the house, the kid tells Sylvia, who's up, he's like, oh yeah, granddad went up there to kill those people, and they messed them up. And then it turns out that apparently they gave the granddad LSD when they were in the attic, because Sylvia's like, oh, he's tripping. They gave him that LSD stuff. And the kid goes, what's LSD? And she goes, it makes people crazy. And the kid goes, wow, they did that to Grandpa? And
He's not drunk, stupid. He's been doped. Huh? With that stuff that they call LSD. The whole bunch take it.
What does it do, that L, whatever you call it?
Boy, you really don't know anything. Well, it makes a person crazy.
Wow. Is that what they've done to Grandpa?
I was laughing at this point. This is what I mean by it's clearly like a movie made to be like, don't take LSD, kids. So Sylvia goes to take care of Grandpa, and then the little kid just goes and gets the double barrel and loads up the shotgun. And then before he leaves, he reaches under the sink and grabs a comically large flashlight to bring with him. And he goes walking. He's ready to kill some people. But on his walk over there, he runs into a dog. And not just any dog, a dog infected with rabies. And he fucking shoots the dog. And Sylvia hears the shot, and she comes out and gets him, and she's like, what's going on? And he's like, I saw a rabid dog. I scared it away. I shot at it, and it went away. And she's like, oh, well, someone's going to have to kill it. You know, you can't let that thing go walking around and shit, you know? So she goes back to take care of Grandpa. And then the kid goes into the Grandpa's office, his vet office, and starts taking syringes and gloves and all this stuff. And I was like, what the fuck is going on here? Like, I was so confused until he walks back out to where the dog is he's shot, and he sticks a syringe into it and pulls out the rabies-infected blood from the dog. And I was like, oh my god, this kid is going to infect the cult with rabies blood and make them go insane. And that's exactly what he does. The next day, he goes to help out in the bakery, and he gets some fresh baked meat pies, and he injects them all with the blood. And so that morning, when a couple members of the cult show up to get some food, he's like, I got these meat pies. Why don't you guys take them? They're fresh out of the oven. And they're like, all right, sure thing. And they take the meat pies. And they go back to the hotel and give everyone some meat pies, and everyone just starts chowing down. Everyone except for Andy, who doesn't eat any of the meat pies. But everyone else is just fucking going to town eating these meat pies. Also, I wrote down, Andy doesn't eat the meat pies, and neither does the guy that they cut his feet. Because for some reason, them making these tiny cuts on his feet, and I guess they did kind of bleed him out when he was in the attic. But he stays passed out for the rest of this movie. He does not wake up. For like 2 days, he is passed out. I don't know what the deal is with him. So everyone's inside eating. Andy takes this time to slip off and go and find Sylvia. And he apologizes to her because if you remember, he's the one that invited her to that party or whatever. And he's like, I didn't know that would happen. He's like, listen, I'm planning on leaving the group. They're involved in bad stuff. I don't want to be involved in all this or whatever. So he's like, I just hope you forgive me. And I don't want to be involved in all this. After that, we go back over to the colon. All of a sudden, everyone's looking a little sick, a little under the weather. And they're sitting around, they're complaining about their stomach is hurting and shit. And, one of the cult dudes who, he's the one that bought the meat pies. He's like, well, that little kid told me they were fresh out of the oven. And it was at this moment that the leader realizes, oh, that kid must have did something to the meat pies to get back to them for last night. So he's like, tonight we're going to go and fuck up their bakery to get back at them. But they never make it to that night because they're all so sick and they just like sit around and they're passed out and stuff. The bakery lady goes back to Roger and tells him about the Satan cult because Sylvia's been telling them all about what happened. But he doesn't believe her, so she's like, fuck you, Roger, and she drives off. Back over to the cult, everyone's real sick this time, and eventually we zoom in on the cult guy who bought the meat pies, and he's sweating, and he's like shaking, and he stands up, and one of the cult leaders, this Asian lady, is like a fortune teller, and she has this card, and she shows it to him, and the fortune is death, and she walks over to the dude that they cut his feet, and places the card down on his chest, and then she hands that dude a knife, and he proceeds to stab this guy in the chest 10 times, according to Andy, because Andy wakes up and sees this happen, and he is like, oh, and he fucking runs away. He's like, I want nothing to do with that, you know? So he runs away. Eventually, the guy who just killed him goes and chases after him for a second, but eventually just comes back. But before he comes back, he grabs an axe out of this tree stump outside, and he walks inside and tries to kill literally every member of the cult. He takes like a lazy swing at one of the girls, and then he goes over to the other girls who have a gun, and they like shoot at the ground, and it spooks them. And then he goes over and tries to kill the leader, but the leader has this sword that he carries around the whole movie, and he points it at him. So since he fails with everyone else, he goes back over to the dead guy that he just killed, and just cuts off his leg, and it's a great like amputated, like it just sort of falls over. But he cuts this guy's leg off. And then he grabs the severed leg and chases after one of the girls into the woods. The leader dude, eventually he goes over to where the leg was cut off, and he sticks his hand in the blood and like takes it up to his hand, and he's about to lick it. But we never see him lick it. Instead, we just hard cut to the bakery lady driving back home. And now the leader dude is just in the woods with his mouth foaming and jumps on top of her car. And is like, yeah, you know. And she gets back in the car and like drives off. And as she's driving, we see other members of the cult like walking on the side of the road and stuff. The bakery lady gets back home and she tells the grandpa everything that's happening. And so the grandpa is like, oh fuck, it must be that rabies dog, because he found out that there was this dog with rabies that was walking around. So they go outside to test the blood that the leader left behind when he jumped up on the car because his hands were bloody. And as they do that, Sylvia, who's left in the kitchen, gets a knock on the door or the window, and it's Andy who is telling her everything that's happening, and like takes her into the barn and is like, oh, they're going crazy, and we got to be safe or whatever. They call Roger and tell him what's happening. So then we get a scene of Roger handing out guns to all of the construction guys and telling them, we got to go down there and scope out the area and stuff. So the construction dudes get in a truck and they're on the way to their hotel to look for the hippies or check out the hippies. And on their way there, they run into the girl who was running away from the axe dude with the severed leg. And this is the same girl who tried to seduce that little kid. And so immediately she's just like, hey, boys, you know? And these construction dudes are all horned up. So they're like, yeah, get in. And they just load her into the truck. The truck. And once they get to the hotel, two of the guys go inside to look around. But the other three just get convinced by the lady to go around back and like just bang her. And they just go around the back. They don't care about what's happening inside. They just go inside or go outside. Hey, they were going inside something. Am I right? Um, uh, Eventually, the two guys who go inside see the dead body on the ground. They're like, all right, something's going on. So they walk up into the attic. And as they start walking up into the attic, there's this sound that keeps playing. It's this constant like ooh, and it keeps getting louder and stuff. And it's amazing the way it keeps building. And we see the noose hanging there from where they strung that guy up to swing around. And at first you're just like, oh yeah, there's that rope. And then you look closer and you notice a foot and you're like, hey, something's going on here. And it ends up being the leader dude who's up on the beam, and he lowers the rope and grabs one of the guys by the neck and then swings around the beam to hang that guy and kill him. And then him and the other guy get in a standoff because the guy dropped his gun and he's trying to go for the gun, but as he does it, the leader jumps in and stabs him in like the spleen, and it like falls out of his stomach. And the whole time that same sound is just getting louder and louder. It was really good. So he kills both of those guys, and then he goes running out into the night. Abruptly, after that scene, we abruptly cut over to Andy and Sylvia, who are just in the barn, like rolling around in hay and making out. Like, just in the middle of all, he's like, oh yeah, everyone's going crazy. They're trying to kill each other. Let's make out. Like, it was very weird how that all happened. The little kid ends up coming in the barn, and he's trying to convince Sylvia to stay away from Andy. And this is when, because he tells her, he's like, oh, I poisoned their pies with rabies blood. And the guy's like, oh, that makes sense. That's why everyone's going crazy. He's like, listen, I didn't drink or I didn't eat any of the pies, so I'm not infected. But he's like, oh, I'm glad, we know why now. So, the kid's like, okay, I guess you're good too, Eventually, we go back over to the construction guys who are coming back around the hotel, and they're like getting redressed with that girl. And they load the girl into the truck again, and they just leave. They don't care about the hotel. They just leave and take her up to the construction site and toss her on the bed where all the guys are around her. And they're like, oh man, it's going to be a good night, As they're in the middle of like banging this lady, we get a voiceover of the granddad talking to Roger, who had showed up to the granddad's house, and he's telling him the symptoms of rabies. And as he's telling him the symptoms of rabies, we see the girl start to freak out as she's underneath this guy. And then I'm trying to figure out a way to put it in here. I might just like blur everything. The girl gets up and runs away naked, and this dude who was banging her follows her, and we just hear like the clap of her ass cheeks and this dude's dick just flopping around. It's the wildest thing I've ever heard in my life, and it's just in this movie. And he like chases her into a shower, and he like turns on the shower, and we learn that like people with rabies are like terrified of water and stuff, So then oh yeah, and randomly after that we get just a random scene of the axe dude who found a rabbit and he's just smacking it against a tree, and then we just cut away. They just want to be like, oh yeah, this guy's still out there. He's still crazy. Um, Two of the other cult members, this one girl who's like, I guess her character is a mute. I read that. And this lady who's pregnant, and I think she's pregnant with the leader dude's baby. They stumble across this lady in like the middle of nowhere at her house, and she takes them inside and is gonna feed them. And she like goes over to a ham and she's carving it up to make sandwiches for him. And as she's making the sandwich, the mute girl looks at the carver and picks it up and turns it on and just slowly walks towards the lady and turns it on. And then we cut to the lady coming out of her front door with her hand cut off and just yelling. And it's an amazing yell. It'll be in here playing. And yeah, and the pregnant lady's like, oh my god, and she goes running away. And they leave the mute lady there, and that's it. You never see the mute lady again. I realized as I was talking about that, so I don't know. I guess maybe she lived through the movie. I don't know what happened, but yeah, she stays there, and the pregnant lady goes running off. Roger is on his way to the construction site, but two guys catch up to him, and they're like, oh, we got to show you this. And they take him over to the edge of this cliff, where at the bottom we see that that slutty girl dead at the bottom. So she was killed and thrown off of this cliff. They go over to the construction site, and all the construction guys are there, and they're just foaming from the mouth, and they all have machetes and weapons, and they just come running towards them. Roger shoots one of them with a shotgun, but there's too many, so they're like, we gotta get to the quarry where it'll be safe. So they run away, and we get more of that chase music, and it's just a wacky chase scene. And I'm pretty sure in the background, you see one of the construction dudes eat shit and have to pick up like his helmet and put it back on and keep chasing after them. But eventually they get to the quarry, and they get in this water, and they start splashing it at the rabies dudes who are afraid of it, so they go running away. We cut over to the leader of the cult, who is still running around, and he comes across this random python that's in a cage in the middle of this field, and he takes it out, and he's like, oh, look at this python. And then this dude who's in like the 1800s onesie pajamas comes around, and he's like, leave that alone. And so the cult dude puts down the snake, and then he just jumps on the guy's back and starts choking him out, and the dude's dentures fall out of his mouth. And then he's dead, and that's the end of that scene. You never see that snake again either. They just kind of threw that one in there. After that, we cut over to Andy and Sylvia and the kid, who are randomly running around in the woods. I don't know when they left the barn. I don't remember a scene of them leaving the barn, but they are, and they're running through the woods. And they fucking run into that pregnant chick who ran away. And Andy is like, oh, listen, you're infected with rabies. It's from the pies that we ate. And she's like, oh, I can't believe it, you know? And they just leave her there to die. Even though they never really, like, that lady never really seemed like she was infected. It just seemed like she was, like, sick from the stomach ache. And to be fair, she didn't finish eating her pie. She gave the rest of it to the leader dude. So, I don't know. But anyway, they leave her to die, and she's all sad. And then she happens to find this random wooden stake in the ground next to her. And she just stabs herself through the stomach and kills herself. And there you go. That's the end of the pregnant lady. Once again, they leave. They come across the axe dude who's in the woods hiding, and he goes to kill them, but they just go into the water and splash at him, and so he goes running off again, because once again, afraid of water. This is stupid. It's like Freddy vs. Jason. I really like that movie, but the dumbest thing is they're like, Jason's afraid of water. And it's like, since when? He's been swimming in water every movie that they've ever made, and now all of a sudden he's afraid of water. But, you know, anyway. Also, is that true? Are rabies dogs and stuff afraid of water? I don't know. Google, somebody. A little sip. A little sip of water. Stay hydrated. Make sure you get up and stretch if you've been sitting a long time. You don't want to get blood clots. Um, after that, we go over to the bakery where the fortune teller lady is outside and she's just slowly walking towards the bakery with a knife. And then Roger pulls up in front of her in a car, and she just like puts the knife behind her back and acts like she wasn't just walking maliciously up to the bakery. Roger goes in, tells the bakery lady that, everyone's crazy. She needs to be safe. Don't let anyone in. And then he leaves again. Sylvia and them get back home. And they go into the barn and they see the grandpa who's dead. He's been killed off screen by somebody with a pitchfork through the neck. So there you go. Grandpa's dead. And then we cut back over to the bakery and we see the lady like boarding up the walls. But the fortune teller lady doesn't care because she just has a can of gasoline and she's just going to burn the place to the ground. Before she can do that, though, the leader dude shows up and they see each other and he charges at her with the sword and he's going to try to kill her. So she just pours a pile of gas on the ground and sits in it and sets herself on fire. It was really crazy. And she just sits there and burns. Sylvia and them run towards the bakery. And once they get there, the axe dude pops out of nowhere and he's about to attack them. But the leader dude comes out and they see each other. So the leader dude and the axe dude start fighting each other. The construction people show up and they're crazy. They start banging on the bakery and they're like, hey, let us in. But she doesn't let them in because she's like, oh, they must be infected with rabies too. So as they're standing out there, one of the construction people just randomly cuts off Andy's head. So Andy's dead. He just gets killed by a random construction guy. And then this is when this bitch finally opens the door and lets them in. She's like, oh, I guess you must be good if they're killing you too, So she lets them in. They go into the cellar of this place and the construction people get in up top and start breaking everything. The leader dude and the axe dude are fighting until eventually the axe dude gets the sword and he stabs the leader dude through the back and somehow out of the mouth, which I'm not sure how that happened. But either way, it did. And so the leader dude is now dead. There's banging going on outside. I hope. It's probably going to pick up. Sorry. One of the construction dudes eventually finds the cellar and comes walking into the basement. So the bakery lady has to shoot him in the head with a shotgun. And then somehow they just slip out up top, even though everyone's up there. They just slip out around the back and get into the car. But the axe dude stops the bakery lady. He starts to attack her, and all the construction people are circling on her too. And I was like, oh man, this must be it. She's going to die. But luckily, there's just a hose that she picks up and starts spraying everyone with water, including the axe dude, and it kills him. He's just killed by by spraying water on him. And she goes to get in the car. She does get bit on the wrist right before she gets in the car, and I was like, ooh, that's gonna come back. It didn't. Sorry, guys. They get in the car. Of course, the car doesn't start, and then the rabies dudes just flip the car over. But before they can do it, the cops roll up, and they just start shooting. They don't care. It's like a minute-long scene of them just shooting shotguns and pistols and all types of stuff until eventually Roger shows up, and he's like, hey, there might be a woman in there. And so they stop shooting. And they go over, and they get everyone out of the car, and everyone's alive. All the rabies peoples are dead. And they put them in the back of an ambulance. And then one of the cops is like, well, thank God those people were put out of their misery. Death by hydrophobia is awful. And then we cut the credits. That's the end of the movie. That's the end of the movie right there. The credits are overlaid with footage of that little kid just walking through a field and shooting a gun. And apparently there's an ending scene that's cut out of him trying to tell the cops that it's all his fault that these people went crazy, and they just laugh at him. And so it goes into him like walking in the in the grass, but that was cut out. So that's the end of the movie that you get. Also cut out, it was supposed to be that they were going to go and Roger was going to visit the lady in the hospital on her bed, and she was going to turn into crazy rabies and bite him or whatever, because she did get bit on the wrist. But the footage was lost, and then they eventually found it, and so if you buy the Blu-ray of this movie, that is in there. But the Prime version does not have that, so that is the end of the movie. Boy, as I got to the end, I realized what a useless character Roger was. Like, he did nothing. And he was supposed to... I was like, man, Roger's going to be the guy that solves all this. At the beginning, when they were like, well, I'm going to go tell Roger. He'll know what to do. But Roger didn't do nothing. He was terrible this whole movie. Let's do best of, worst of for I Drink Your Blood. My best of is absolutely the attic. The whole scene from the point that the music, that sound started building up. It was crazy. It was great. This is why I like 70s movies like this, as cheesy as they are. They have crazy sound effects that always are just like they're just amazing. Worst of but worst of is gonna be the axe dude getting killed by water. Yeah, that was terrible. Out of all the things you could kill him with, you're gonna kill water. Also, the grandpa getting killed off screen. What was that all about? But yeah. So there you go. That's my best of, worst of. So also randomly a news article just popped up of Conor McGregor. Apparently he was hit while he was on a bicycle ride by a car. He's like, I could be dead, but he's not. So, there you go. And then budget for this movie, I didn't see one. Let me see if I can find one right now. I doubt it, but hey, while I'm looking that up, how about Justin Roiland getting fired from all of his shows, including Rick and Morty, where he does all the voices and writes the show, and they're like, we're gonna keep going. And I was like, I don't think you are. I think they're gonna make the next season, and then people are probably gonna be like, well, that's a wrap on you, and it's just gonna get canceled. Which I'm not saying they shouldn't have fired Justin Roiland, because it definitely kind of, I know he hasn't been proven guilty, but a lot of it definitely seems pretty guilty. And with all the minor stuff going, it's a little. So I'm not saying they shouldn't have fired him. I'm just saying they should have probably just been like, well, the show's ended. But I get they want to keep going on, but we'll see what happens. I feel partially responsible since I just watched all of that show after years of being like, I'm not watching it, and then he gets fucking canceled right after this happens. So, but anyway, I could not find a budget or anything, by the way. So that's it. That's I Drink Your Blood. It was a lot of fun to watch. There's a lot of wacky moments. So it reminded me a lot of the Crazies. And obviously it reminded me too of like Night of the Living Dead, like just zombie movies in general. But yeah, it was fun. So there you go. Go check it out if you listen through this much and you want to see it for yourself, if you didn't care about the spoilers before. Next week, if you notice it's not Child's Play this week, it probably won't be Child's Play next week either, seeing as how things are going. The way I'm going to do it, I'm going to give it 2 more weeks. So next week, and then the week after that, and if Child's Play hasn't happened, then in 3 weeks I'll do Child's Play myself, and we'll get it over with, because I'm tired of I'm tired of putting it off. So it'll get done in 3 weeks if it hasn't gotten done. So hopefully it will. I don't know. This somehow went from a 4-man to a 3-man to a 2-man to basically a 1-man thing at this point. So we'll see. We might have to change some things up in the future. Yeah, but yeah, so in 3 weeks, if it hasn't been done, I'll do Child's Play 2019 and get it out of the way. So next week, most likely, uh, what do we want to watch? Let me look in the list of movies. Next week we're gonna watch a movie called Caveat from 2020 that is written down in my notes and it looked spooky. So there you go. Next week, most likely it'll be Caveat, unless Child's Play gets done, which I doubt. So there you go. So that's what we're gonna do. So sorry about all the yeah. Anyway, thanks for watching, listening. Go check out the gaming channel and everything. This week, an Assassin's Creed 2 video came out, and again, it should be another Madden video should be out there. So go watch those. And I will see you guys next week for most likely Caveat. Yeah. So, alright. Bye.